Meanwhile, from Serie A to France's Ligue 1, you could argue that Marseille are off to a flying start, but if you prefer, you could say they've got a lot of va-va-voom about them in their 5-1 win against Brest, Andy. You know, there is an obvious question when we talk about Ligue 1 and anybody contending for that title, which perhaps we'll come to in a second. But first of all, this win against Brest, for you, it's looking really good for Marseille, isn't it?
I think taking this performance on face value, you can't think anything else, really. It was just an incredible early statement from them. Now, coming from what Nicky was talking about Conte picking up a Napoli team that was on its uppers after last season, Roberto De Zerbi has come in to a Marseille where there was open warfare for a lot of last season between the board and the fans, where everything went really quite badly on the pitch, where they lost the coach halfway through the season, after losing one early as well, and where they've undergone a profound change in terms of the squad they've got. So for them to turn up at a team that qualified for the Champions League last season, Brest, and for Brest to be qualifying for the Champions League and Marseille not even to have European football is seismic for French football. You can't look at it any other way. For them to turn up and say, not just we're improving, but we are back, and play with that sort of style was phenomenal. Now, look, Brest have got a few personnel issues, and they had a few missing. They've lost a few key players this summer as well, notably Lilian Brassier, who's gone to Marseille. But still, you know, we're talking about this, and we will be talking about this for the next couple of weeks. A lot of these teams are half or three quarters finished. Marseille looked nearer finished than a lot of teams that I saw last weekend. They played with great verve, and I think the thing that was the most notable about them is they were so efficient. I mean, they had 7 shots at goal, 5 on target, scored them all, and they won 5-1. I mean, there's absolutely no flab there. This is a six-pack that you could bounce a coin off. And I think when you look at the players they've brought in, and it's not just the players they've brought in, because Roberto De Zerbi seems to be getting a lot out of existing players who maybe weren't fulfilling their potential before. But we have to say, Mason Greenwood, clearly there is a context around him. And clearly, like, the mayor of Marseille didn't want him at the club, but he did perform brilliantly in this first game. So scored 2, including the first one after 3 minutes, made 2 and won a penalty as well. And this was underlining an uncomfortable truth, really, about Greenwood. The fact that the ability is such that if it wasn't for the off-pitch stuff, there's no way he would be playing for Marseille. And everyone in France is aware of that.
It's so difficult. I find this topic just incredibly grim to talk about, to be honest with you, because exactly as Andy has said, I don't think anyone's ever suggested that Mason Greenwood isn't a good enough footballer. That's not what the conversation about Mason Greenwood is about. I really was disappointed, frustrated at Roberto De Zerbi's comments that him scoring goals will make him less of a target for controversy. The controversy has not been, oh, Mason Greenwood doesn't score enough goals. The controversy is that he was charged with rape and assault, and those charges were dropped because the key witness decided to not press her with charges. But that meant the case was, I think, for a lot of people, felt unresolved, because there was a lot of stuff that came out very publicly in that case that all of us saw and heard, and made a lot of us extremely uncomfortable. I think it's just an extremely difficult topic to ignore for anyone who's got any familiarity with that sort of behaviour in their own lives. I think it's just a really, really uncomfortable situation. But the fact is he's there. The fact is he's not going to stop being there. And the fact is that he is going to help Marseille to be a more successful team this season. That's just an objective sort of reflection of the reality.
Yeah, I think most people will agree with you there. Off the back of what Nikki said there about De Zerbi, though, is he the right manager for Marseille? Not just managing what's on the pitch, but off the pitch.
That's the question that we can't know yet. And you're right to point it out, Dotton, because he is a combustible guy, a combustible club. In the short to medium term, that tends to work best for Marseille. Fire meeting fire. And we've seen it before with Bielsa, with Sampaoli, to an extent with Igor Tudor as well, who might not have the same reputation as the previous two, but is intense and then some. And that is what works at Marseille, intensity. And that is the sort of football that De Zerbi is going to produce. Now, I think we should sort of back away from those cliches, even if they are at least partly grounded in truth, to look at what he actually did in that first game, because he's clearly coached those players really intensely already. Now, you saw I was talking about players who maybe haven't quite fulfilled their potential in recent times. Amin Harit, who's had more than his share of off-field baggage as well, and as it seemed to weigh on him at times, and he's really struggled to produce what it's been clear that he's capable of ever since he was at Nantes. They played him. De Zerbi played him in this sort of inside right position, positioning him quite close to Greenwood, and I think that makes a lot of sense actually. Finding a place where you can put your most technically gifted players in the same part of the pitch, and in terms of them making the most of the chances they had, that definitely helped. High quality and just no fuss efficiency. That really did it for them. I think the other thing we have to underline though is the quality of player to an extent. Because Pierre-Emile Højbjerg was great, sort of locking the door bit behind them. He's clearly got a lot of football in him and hasn't been playing, of course, at Tottenham over the last little while, but was obviously eager to grab a project by the collar and say, right, okay, I can make this mine. And I wonder what you think, Nikki, about De Zerbi himself as well, because it was such a sort of wet end to his time at Brighton as well. Overall, of course, he was a great success there, and I think he added a lot to the Premier League. But that last couple of months, particularly after the Europa League exit to Roma, it was all a bit of a fizzling out rather than fireworks of an exit. And I do wonder if that sort of had an influence on, the potential leads of bigger clubs or bigger teams, certainly, in Liverpool, Bayern, Barcelona, that those leads sort of disappearing into thin air.
Yeah, it did feel like perhaps De Zerbi's peak in terms of his reputation at Brighton was almost after year one rather than year two, and there was that moment where he was being discussed in contention for some of the biggest jobs going. And even at the time, I think I would say that I was arguing, well, hang on, there are probably some names even within Italian managers who I think should be getting that consideration ahead of him for those jobs. But he's bounced through four clubs now in the last 6 seasons. I think he perhaps is reaching a point where if he's going to ever make his name, it almost feels like this is the moment. You've got to not make his name, because as you say, he's established a very impressive reputation. It's not like he's not highly considered, but I think he almost sort of is at risk of becoming that guy who just bounces from one club to the next and never really putting his more long-term mark somewhere. And perhaps that's just the nature of his football, because this start we've seen with Marseille, it's quite familiar. It's the same things we saw at Sassuolo, at Brighton. probably at Shakhtar as well. I'll say the truth.
Yes.
I don't get to watch a lot of Ukrainian top flight football, but I imagine it was much the same. He comes in, he brings this energy, he brings this willingness to be daring and play out from the back and take risks. And I think that it's something he's been very good at, getting players to buy into, to say, okay, we're going to go with you on this, we're going to take those chances, and then finding rewards for it and scoring the goals. And I think what tends to happen, or at least I've seen happen, in particular the two places where I've been most able to focus on his work, at Sassuolo, at Brighton, is not that it completely stops being effective, but that opponents get wiser to it and learn how to punish the mistakes as they get made, because it is always a risk-taking football. It is an approach that has that vulnerability to it. If you keep taking risks and opponents are as direct and aggressive in trying to punish you when they manage to steal the ball, it can unravel. So who knows? It definitely feels like a familiar start, and that is to say a positive start. I mean, when you look at the reality of Marseille, I think Aubameyang scored 17 goals for them last season. He's gone. After that, nobody else, I think, scored more than 3 goals for them in Ligue 1 last season. Well, already, after one game, you've got 2 players on 2 goals for this Marseille team. It looks like De Zerbi ball. It looks like him doing what he does. He's got people scoring goals and playing on the front foot. And I think the energy of the city of Marseille feels like a potentially combustible but also potentially good match for him, because I think they're going to get swept up in it. And I think it's going to be, while it's good, it's going to be very, very good. I wonder about what's going to happen when it stops being good, but I think that the potential for momentum to gather in that city with that football fan base, where I think I'm right in saying they've also set records for season ticket sales this season, I think the potential is pretty big for the initial momentum to be a lot.
Yeah, I think Nicky's absolutely right to bring in the energy of the city in the conversation. But if De Zerbi, like Nicky says, has to make a mark for himself, he arguably is not in a better position coaching Marseille in Ligue 1, where PSG are the team to beat. If he were to achieve that, surely he would have made the mark that Nicky mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really about beating them to the title, because I think we should probably say that's nigh on impossible, and not just because of where they're coming from. There was an article in L'Equipe in the days leading up to the season, and it's a great newspaper, but it was a headline that says, "Can PSG still win the league without Mbappe?" And I just found myself reading it and saying, "Are you joking?" they've got like what, 4 times the budget of the next wealthy team in the division, and that's without even talking about the current context of diminished TV rights and all the rest of it that's kind of slowed up the transfer market. And my goodness, there are some French clubs that really need to sell at the moment. But I think the other thing is, even if they are going to move away from this sort of superstar focused model, you look at the depth, and they went to Le Havre at the weekend, on Friday night, the opening game. Le Havre gave them a good game. It was 1-1 with 85 minutes gone, and bang, 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 they bring on João Neves, who they've just bought for a ton of money from Benfica, 2 assists in the last 5 minutes. They bring on Ousmane Dembélé, gets the second one. Bradley Barcola scores a brilliant goal. And all of a sudden, Didier Digard, the very good coach, who's just arrived as the head coach of Le Havre, did a great job at Nice before. He sat there going, in the press conference, going, "What happened there? We were drawing 1-1 with 5 minutes left, and this is what PSG can do to you." And like we're talking about a PSG that are not quite, like all the rest of the teams, are not quite at optimum tilt at the moment. So, like, getting past them, and that they won't be finished in the transfer market either, is going to be really difficult. Look, if De Zerbi can get Marseille back into the Champions League, playing the sort of football that that they hinted that they could play on the first day of the season, it's going to be an enormously successful campaign.